When Napoleon lay at Boulogne for a year with his flat-bottomed boats and his grand army, he was told by someone, "There are bitter weeds in England." There are certainly a great many more of them since the British Expeditionary Force returned. So I have, myself, full confidence that if all do their duty, if nothing is neglected, and if the best arrangements are made as they are being made, we shall prove ourselves once more able to defend our island home, to ride out the storm of war, and to outlive the menace of tyranny, if necessary, for years, if necessary, alone. At any rate, that is what we are going to try to do. That is the resolve of His Majesty's government, every man of them. That is the will of Parliament and the nation. The British Empire and the French Republic, linked together in their cause and in their need, will defend to the death their native soil, aiding each other like good comrades to the utmost of their strength. Even though large tracts of Europe and many old and famous states have fallen, or may fall, into the grip of the Gestapo and all the odious apparatus of Nazi rule, we shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And even if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island, or a large part of it, were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond is armed and guarded by the British fleet, will carry on the struggle until, in God's good time, the new world with all its power and might steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Houston, Texas, this July 15th, 2024 at 4:34 p.m. Central Daylight Time. I've got exactly one piece to share with you today, and that is from Naomi Wolf about the assassination attempt. Before I do that, I want to remind everybody that rainfall is here. That's right, my friends. The best lotion that the world has ever known is now officially available to all of us. That's right. Rainfall has arrived. The lotion takes the healing power of aloe vera and adds to it argan oil, amaranth oil, babassu oil, apricot kernel oil, hemp seed oil, evening primrose oil, rosehip oil, vitamin E oil, and I'm probably forgetting one. It's the best lotion ever, guys. The scent will intoxicate you, and you will cause the skin, the dead skin that lies atop the fresh skin underneath, the dead skin will tumble right away. Make sure to go to tulipblooms.shop. That's tulipblooms.shop. Use promo code Shapiro to pry $1 from my grasping hands. And if you get 3 or more bottles, you get free shipping. I want to say a big thank you to Reaper1776 and Howie DeWitt, who are both in the Twitter chat, in the X chat, formerly Twitter. I'm trying to get a little more action on my Twitter, guys, because let's face it, you know it, I know it. I am freaking like suppressed as F on Rumble. It's terrible. I had the biggest stream that I have had personally for reading epic threads for a long ass time, and I did not get one single new subscriber on Rumble. Now, I am grateful to have a platform on Rumble, but in my opinion, I am very, very badly suppressed there. So if you can, and you're on X watching right now, retweet this, follow me on Twitter, etc., etc., etc. All right, let us begin with our piece for the day. It is called Thanatos, possibly Thanatos, by Naomi Wolf. NaomiWolf.substack.com. Thanatos, Death Gods, and the Attack on President Trump. The death drive comes to America. Dr. Naomi Wolf. Have the powers of gods of death been unleashed in our relatively peaceable nation? I'm in a hip, storied, deep blue Catskills town. I was having a restful little writer's retreat on my own in a miniature cottage overlooking a small burbling brook. Orange daylilies, just past their glory, line the banks of the talkative brook and lift their crowns to one another like torn silk scarves. A fresh, warm breeze walks through the town among the pedestrians. It seems to come straight from heaven. Children outside the organic ice cream shop, crazed with sugar, run round and round on a patch of grass and a chalk-brightened pathway, or they stare fixedly at the ice cream scoops melting slowly on their cones, trying to figure out how best to approach devouring them. The mountain that overlooks the tiny town is soft and mid-green. Its presence is benign. The vibe of the earth here is nurturing. When I stood next to the stream, which expands to become a famous creek late last night, a spillage of stars and a bright yellow half-moon served as our canopy. My friend who lives here told me that Buddhist monks who visit this area say that the dragon's breath, a good thing, still remains hovering along the runnels of the creek. I strangely understood something of what she was saying. Everywhere, you would think, here would be the cherishing and treasuring of life. And yet, a love of death. A death god's ravenous hunger, a death god's forcing of obedience in many human minds, a new thing, or a newly revealed, ancient thing, a weird thing, weird in the archaic sense of relating to the uncanny, to the cutting short of life, seems now to run through this town, through these deep blue cultures, and through our times. Merriam-Webster, weird derives from the Old English noun weird, W-Y-R-D, essentially meaning fate. By the 8th century, the plural weirda, with an E at the end of it, had begun to appear in texts as a gloss for parcae, the Latin name for the fates, 3 goddesses who spun, measured, and cut the thread of life. This weird thread runs, devouring. This death god of a death cult, if that is what it is, seems to have different logic and hungers, upside down logic and hungers from the logic and hungers of life. Yesterday morning, I was at the adorable flea market. Handmade candles, embroidered sundresses, old vinyl records, lip balms made of beeswax. The people there were like those among whom I grew up and whom I should have recognized as some of the original practitioners of a renewed 1960s, 1970s life cult. That is to say, they were old hippies. An odd note, a bizarre cheeriness about serious illness, disability, and even death is prevalent these days. I overheard this shouted conversation. How's Bill doing? Is he out of the hospital? He's great. He's had a heart monitor put in. They're going to be watching him now always. This response was given in a cheerful, happy voice. In the old world, that situation would not have been described so glowingly. It might have been great that Bill is okay, or that he is better than expected, and that his team is cautiously optimistic. But that sing-song, upbeat, great, delivered in a voice like Dick Van Dyke's, when he was about to burst into a dance routine amid the chimney pots of London in Walt Disney's film Mary Poppins, would not have been considered quite appropriate. I asked recently how some acquaintances from that deep blue world were enjoying their summer. Both husband and wife reported what sounded to me like absolute horrors. A brother had had a stent put into his heart and was recovering from that surgery when he got a serious cancer diagnosis. A sister-in-law had 2 strokes and had lost all function on the right side. Still others from the deep blue world explain, when I ask how they are, that they now have neuropathy, and or that they are going in to get a hip replaced, and or that they are looking after an elder relative who needs a bypass, and or that they are looking after people with cancer. Or they list how often they or their relatives, quote, got COVID. Their voices are upbeat. But when I express sympathy or condolences, they look at me as if they don't understand what I'm saying. I've reflected later on this strange miscommunication, this lack of social alignment in the conversation. Then I realized this recitation of medical horrors, often needing continued medical attention, is presented with an expression almost of fulfillment, and in tones almost of satisfaction, even of pride. I posted something about this on X and got hundreds of people describing similar moments. Many described this recitation as sounding like an achievement or status symbol. Others sought to understand it as a logical expression of years of propaganda, of virtue signaling. Look how good I am. I took one for the team. Still others wondered if, after years of brainwashing that deified the medical establishment, these people feel closer to God or to ultimate authority by now being under the continual care of doctors. Do we have to face the fact that there is a death cult ascendant in our world? We in the West have, for the last 300 years, been living in what Steve Bannon calls the sunlit uplands of consciousness. The old pre-modern world, with its demons and ghosts, was banished by the Enlightenment and the promises of modern Christianity, very different from the beliefs of medieval Christianity, which deeply feared the forces of darkness, comforted us that all was well. The light, life everlasting, reason, human well-being had won out. So we all got out of the habit of thinking about death gods and the death drive and death worship. We have become used to taking for granted that humans want life. They want to survive. They want to be healthy. We have created whole societies based on those assumptions, considered so basic to the human experience that we did not even question them. To be human and alive was to want all of these things, of course. L'chaim, as we say in Hebrew when we toast to life. But now there is something that has entered the world, or that has been unveiled, that is counter or oppositional to this set of life and health-oriented goals of longings. You know that for about a year since I wrote my essay, Have the Ancient Gods Returned? I have been struggling with the question of, what is this darkness? Is it Satan or Moloch or Baal? Speaking metaphorically and metaphysically, or perhaps some forces with which we are unfamiliar. I am slowly becoming convinced that this darkness has many flavors and names and faces, perhaps even many different tasks, just as other cultures have always understood. So among these dark forces is a death drive. This it is that drives some people to love illness, to embrace debility, to boast of injury, to seem even to court, or at least not to shy away from, death itself. Sigmund Freud, in Civilization and Its Discontents, called this death drive Thanatos, a name derived from that of the god of death who, in Greek mythology, brought the souls of humans to the underworld. Freud believed that the death drive was the counterpart to eros, or the erotic drive, the drive toward life, and that these two were the essential contrasting drives that underlay human conflicts and motivations. Many cultures before ours have had death cults and death worship, or have venerated figures that represent the end of life, the limitations on human endeavor, or the darkness that can encompass and swallow us all. The Egyptian god Set, or Seth, was the master of disorder, chaos, violence, storms. Seth embodied the necessary and creative element of violence and disorder within the ordered world. Kali, in the Hindu tradition, is the goddess of creative destruction. Kali is said to live in cemeteries amid decaying corpses, reminding us that our world is nothing but a cemetery where all things that are born must decay and die. She wears a garland of skulls to show us that we too must cut asunder the skeletons in our closet. She gives us the implements for our own personal excisions. She drips blood while consuming all of creation. She reminds us that every minute is constantly destroyed in the cycle of time. I think we must face what the death gods do as they determine events at specific periods in history. One thing the death gods clearly do is become hungrier and hungrier. Once a culture unleashes them, meaning that no amount of bloodshed, no amount of human sacrifices ever satiates them until their time is spent. The Nazi era obviously reveals the hunger for endless murder and suffering in these unleashed death cult forces. The murderousness of Nazi murder rituals went far beyond what was necessary to deal with the so-called Jewish question, and you saw this ravenousness escalate quickly. What tends to happen is that once human life is declared violable, once that sacred line is crossed, at first there are few and quote-unquote justifiable sacrifices, as with the first careful selective euthanasia program run by doctors in Germany, Action T4 in 1939, that disappeared mentally defective teenagers, but very quickly, because that bright line has been blurred. Sacrifice was piled on sacrifice, and the bodies mounted, and tortures were piled on tortures for hungry death's own sake alone. This almost ritualistic escalation is common to many times and places in which these dark gods are invoked or released. The Holocaust shares this demonstration of a death cult running rampant with other massacres. Stalin's murders of 3 to 5 million in the Ukraine and in Russia itself in the 1930s. Quote, they, kulaks, were called enemies of the people, as well as swine, dogs, cockroaches, scum, vermin, filth, garbage, half animals, apes. Activists promoted murderous slogans. We will exile the kulak by the thousand when necessary. Shoot the kulak breed. We will make soap of kulaks. Our mass enemies must be wiped off the face of the earth. One Soviet report noted that gangs, quote, drove the dekulakized naked in the streets, beat them, organized drinking bouts in their houses, shot over their heads, forced them to dig their own graves, undressed women and searched them, stole valuables, money, etc. The dehumanization comes first. And then the orgies of hatred and sadism tend to follow similar lines when the gods of death are loosed. The killing fields of Cambodia's Pol Pot, 1975 to 1979, who murdered up to 3 million, shared this tempo and escalation, as did the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, in which about 800,000 people died. There is a certain flavor to events when the gods of death are released. Violence, it seems, becomes arbitrary and addictive. It loses any strategic or goal-oriented logic. When I reported on Sierra Leone in 2004 after a bloody civil war, for instance, I saw this clearly. In village after village, the hands of villagers, including those of children or their legs, had been hacked off by machetes. Why? Simply because that was what was happening. It had been done to a village, to soldiers, to children. So then that village or those soldiers did it in turn to other villages, other soldiers, other children. Rapes, violent, always, of course, to start with, grew increasingly violent and sadistic. Objects were used. Women were left bleeding or dead. Why? Because that was what was happening. The dark gods were free. In the aftermath of this frenzy, we reporters were in a Sierra Leone that was rebuilding itself. Peace had been brokered, and business and schools were reopening. The scars of the machete attacks and the bereavements and the burned down huts were visible everywhere. But that ecstasy of killing and rape, the fury of the gods of death, had moved on, or else their energies had been sated, or else they had gone back to hell. We had better be studying history because the gods of death are back. That genocidal hunger, so characteristic of the worst times and places in history, is roaming around now freely in our nation, the blessed United States. I had to have a surreal public argument against what right-wing commentator Candace Owens had posted on X when she insanely or extremely ignorantly produced a podcast called Literally Hitler, in which she made the case that they had made Hitler into some kind of Voldemort character, as she derangedly put it. She also speculated that stories about Dr. Mengele's experiments could not be true because she reasoned this would represent a waste of resources. They experimented on twins. I mean, some of the stories, by the way, sound completely absurd. The idea that they could just cut a human up and sew them back together. Why would you do that? That's a tremendous waste of time and supplies. That last form of reasoning revealed the brutal ignorance of a generation born and raised in a time without the presence of the death forces. The ignorance of a person who was not bothered to become educated about the times in history, including during American slavery, when the death gods were on the march. Let's just see if we can. I thought this was going to be about the Trump assassination attempt, etc., 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 etc. All right, so let's see if we can move right to here, because I don't want a lengthy Holocaust accounting. Okay. I'm just going to I'm going to jump in here. I think I'm going to bow out of this one because I did not know what I was getting into when I jumped into that. So I think I'm going to switch to something else entirely. And I hope you'll be okay with that, because I thought it was going to talk about the Trump assassination attempt when in fact it was just a lengthy lead in to talking about her own family who died in the Holocaust. And it's just not what I signed up for. I don't mean that as any kind of slight to Naomi Wolf. I genuinely don't. You know what I'm saying? All right. So what I also want to do is I want to check out a piece from Katie Kirkland at makeartgoodagain.substack.com. All right. There we go. This piece is entitled Debate Me, Bro. Wow, this is amazing. Guys, there are so many of you. Well, there's Carla Burton chatting on X. Thank you so much, Carla. Dan in Alabama says hello. Anyone there? Hello, Dan. Howie DeWitt, once again, born to die, lol, freestyle it up. All good, Patrick, says Carla Burton. And now for something completely different. Yes, I think that's a line from something. Yeah, something completely different needed to happen there. And I just want to say how much I respect Naomi Wolf. I really, really do. It's very rare that I bail out on a piece. When I do, it's because I completely did not expect this to be about the I had all these friends and family die in the Holocaust stuff, which is not what I wanted to cover. I wanted to cover the Trump assassination, but it was like halfway through. So let's go ahead and do a piece that I was planning on on reading from Katie Kirkland at makeartgoodagain.substack.com. That's makeartgoodagain.substack.com. This piece is entitled "Debate Me, Bro." Katie Kirkland. I have a confession. I've never been a fan of debates. Aside from a handful of presidential ones over the years, I have more or less tried to avoid attending or watching debates. Even most of those presidential debates I watched only because someone else in the household was watching them and I happened to be in the room. In a society that is so academically focused, or at least fancies itself to be that, this discomfort with debates is something I've felt hesitant to express until recently. In part, this is because there is a sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken assumption in our society that people who are unwilling to listen to a debate then must also be unwilling to entertain opposing viewpoints. Perhaps it was a bit shallow on my part, but I didn't want that assumption made of me, especially since I know I spend probably too much of my time trying to understand viewpoints that differ from my own. But that reason was only a small part of why I hesitated to express this sentiment. In a larger part, it is because I wasn't even sure I knew why I disliked debates. They felt cringy to me. That's not really a satisfactory reason. It wasn't until sometime in this last year that it finally dawned on me why I find them so cringy. It's because, despite how they are billed, debates are not a good way to ascertain the truth. In my opinion, they may even be one of the worst ways to find the truth. Before I go on, I should clarify. I'm not talking about interactions between friends, family, acquaintances, colleagues, or even random people on the internet in which differing viewpoints are discussed. Those are conversations, not debates. We just call them debates because our society has so much stifled our ability to converse with others that any conversation that is not a resounding chorus of "I agree with that" is considered contentious. No, I'm talking about formal and semi-formal debates, those events in which two or more parties plan to come together to debate opposing views on a particular subject, whether that's something as formal as a presidential or academic debate or something less formal, like on a podcast. But whatever the format, debates, formal or semi-formal, are not a search for truth, even if the participants think they are. Think about it. Two debating parties come together to present their arguments for what they believe is true. Both sides have already determined that no matter what the other side says, that side is wrong and maybe also morally deficient. They have closed themselves off from considering anything new or being willing to change or modify their own beliefs. Then there is the audience. At best, 45% back the position of party A, 45% back the position of party B. They, just like the debaters, have already decided what they believe and are not there to consider other possibilities. All that is left is that 10% of the audience that maybe has not yet settled on a position or has settled but is still open-minded to new arguments. Truly, this scenario is probably a bit idealized. How often is the crowd actually somewhat equally weighted instead of being saturated with backers of one side or the other? This could be because one of the participants was brought in to give an opposing view to an audience that is used to hearing one particular side. Or in a more sinister scenario, it could be because the audience was seated with people of a particular viewpoint in order to intimidate the participant presenting the opposing view. And that 10% of the audience being open-minded is probably rather high an estimate. But for the sake of argument, we'll go with this idealized scenario. Next, we get to the debate itself. Each side will present arguments in favor of their own position, as well as arguments that are intended to debunk the position of the other side. In a perfect world, the person who presents the best arguments would win the debate. The audience, or at least that 10% that haven't already dug in their heels, would see those arguments, consider them, and use them to make up or change their minds. But we don't live in a perfect world. The winner of a debate is rarely, if ever, the person who presents the best evidence or reasoning. The winner of a debate is the one who trips up the least, or, put another way, the one who can get the other to trip up more. Debates live and die, not based on truth, but on the gotcha moments. Party A makes a point that Party B hasn't heard or prepared for and doesn't have a response to. Ha, gotcha. Of course, that doesn't make Party A correct. Party A could be making a completely fallacious point, but because Party B doesn't have a response or a good response, the score goes up for the side that made the fallacious argument. Party B points out that Party A used a logical fallacy. Ha, gotcha. Of course, while using a logical fallacy as a poor way to argue a point, it doesn't automatically make Party A wrong. It just means Party A presented a poorly constructed argument, and pointing out a logical fallacy doesn't make Party B correct in their points. It just means they can spot a bad argument. People can be correct in their belief on a subject, but still do a poor job of arguing for that belief. People can be incorrect in their belief on a subject, but still do an excellent job of arguing for that false belief. The ability or inability to convincingly argue a point is not what makes it true or false. Truth is truth, regardless of the ability or inability of its defenders. Debates are not about finding the truth. They're sporting events. But unlike other sporting events in which the audience, at least in theory, understands that it's all just for entertainment and doesn't have any real consequences on their lives, debates have been built up as the ultimate way to prove the facts of an argument. We're supposed to choose elected officials based on debates. We're supposed to determine which scientific arguments are valid based on debates. We're supposed to decide what is orthodox and what is heresy based on debates. These are not inconsequential things. But debates have an inherent flaw that makes them unsuitable for being part of the decision process for anything monumental. Pride. Pride is built into them. Most, if not all, participants sitting in front of an audience are not going to go into a debate with the willingness to pause and consider when they are presented with an idea or fact that they had not considered before. There is no space to breathe or time for either the natural changing of one's mind or the natural solidification of a stance during a debate. That would ruin the pacing of the debate and hurt the pride of the person who chose to publicly defend something he or she couldn't adequately defend. There is little choice but for participants to bluff or splutter their way through that particular point until the moderator, if one is present, moves the debate along. If we are truly interested in discerning truth or hearing different perspectives, then we should do away with debates as truth-seeking exercises. All they do is encourage partisan behavior from participants and audiences alike, which often prevents the discovery of truth rather than encouraging it. Instead, we should put debates in their proper place as entertainment. As I said earlier, debates are sporting events, and we should treat them as such. Be entertained, admire the skills, armchair mock the fumbles, laugh at the witty comments and zingers. Just don't take them any more seriously than you would a game of sports ball, and maybe even slightly less so. And that is makeartgoodagain.substack.com. Wonderful stuff. Enjoyed that a lot. We're going to keep this one short today. I need to go ahead and get the rice started. Hey guys, get your Rainfall. You can get it at epicminerals.net. Rainfall is the very best lotion the world has ever known. Check that out. Made that ourselves from scratch, all organic ingredients, using the healing power of aloe and the very fresh oaky vanilla-y scent of benzoin essential oil. You got to try it to believe it. It makes the dead skin fall away. It brings back life to skin that's dry and cracked. I've watched it heal skin right in front of my eyes, guys. Go to epicminerals.net. Use promo code Shapiro to pry $1 from my grasping hands. And if you buy 3 or more bottles, you get free shipping. Rainfall. Put it on your skin. All right. What do you think? Working on it. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. And I will keep doing this. I'm still trying to figure out how to get Odyssey to put my streams live. It didn't work. Didn't work at all. In any event, let's pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you tomorrow.